All right. Gospel Luke chapter 14. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then, in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit down in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." And then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He also said to the one who had invited him, "Now, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers, your sisters, your rich neighbors, in case they might invite you in return, so you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. You will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of the Lord lives forever. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I'm glad Barry didn't go too far into the bear arms thing. Because I've got enough uncomfortable stuff to talk about today. All right. So lately, I've been obsessing a little about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Yeah, oh, here we go. Well, you know, when we went there, what you see in the picture is the old city of Jerusalem. So you see the wall, and it's kind of like a panoramic photo. That's why it looks a little funny, but we were kind of close to it. It's really big. When we went there, I didn't have a firm grasp on the Israel-Palestine conflict. I knew they were fighting. There was Jews and Muslims fighting each other. I knew that Christians were involved in there somewhere, but not really sure how. I knew they'd been fighting for a long time. I knew the Muslims had control over there in recent centuries before this in the last century. I knew that there had been a lot of violent footprints left there from a lot of violent conquests from Muslims, from Christians, from Romans, from, Persians actually weren't destroyers, but then you think about Babylon, who destroyed the southern kingdom, Assyria, who destroyed the northern kingdom. There's been a lot of violent footprints left there in that area. And I knew that the conflict going on, the fighting, has some kind of roots going all the way back to Abraham, at least theological roots. And I knew that somehow they were fighting, something had to do with the land. Wasn't entirely sure what that was all about. So with all that, I just kind of meshed together in my mind. It was a little confusing and had me thinking, like most people, and something that I've actually said here at times is like that this conflict is just what it is. It's been going on forever. There's nothing that's going to change it anytime soon. It's just what it is. Kind of brushing it off as people on both sides are just, they're just too full of themselves to stop fighting, and to have peace with each other, something like that. Then when we went there, what we found seemed as complicated and as confusing as it all sounds. Like how complicated and confusing it might seem to be at a wedding reception, trying to figure out who is sitting where. Have you ever done that at a wedding reception? Try to figure out why certain people are sitting in the places that they are. You can usually tell who the mom is. You can usually tell who the dad is, the bride and groom, the wedding party. You can tell they have seats of honor. You can identify them pretty quickly. But then unless you know the family really well, there's a whole lot of other people that you don't recognize. You have no idea who they are, what connection they have to the bride and groom, and why they're sitting where they are. It's just a big hodgepodge of people there. You don't really know. You probably found your spot at that wedding because there was some kind of indicator. Oh, before I move on the picture, I forgot that is an ancient road in Jerusalem. So that's like thousands of years ago, generations back, is that road in Jerusalem. And so then while you're sitting there at the table, you get a chance to ponder. Like, why in the world am I sitting with these people? Who made these decisions? Yeah, it may be clear as day why you got sat where you're sitting. You may be like Bob, and you know exactly why they put you at the kids' table. Or you may have been behaving just fine, and you're wondering, what am I doing at the kids' table? I don't belong here. I belong at a higher place of honor. Well, that's kind of like how we were wondering and confused in Israel and Palestine. Seeing how confusing it was. You see the wall, and you see how restricted Palestinians are. Now, if you see of the wall here, on the left side, that's the Palestinian side of the wall. On the right side, that's the Israeli side of the wall. And that is could be literally the opposite sides of the wall from each other, because on the right, that's where we're visiting Rachel's tomb in Israel, and that's right next to the wall on the way to Bethlehem, and we were basically going towards Bethlehem when we stopped on the Palestinian side of the wall. So that's kind of both sides of the wall there. You see the wall, you see how unbalanced each side is. You see how Israel has all of the power, and you see how intimidating that can be. And then, if you were like me, I just couldn't help but wonder, why are the Palestinians being forced to sit at the kids' table? And beyond that, it's like a kids' table where the kids aren't even being served because the adults are busy enjoying their plates. Like the kids' table in that situation isn't being cared for very well. The Palestinians have claimed to the banquet just like the Jews do. And the thing is, the Jewish and Muslim Christian religious stuff is what makes it so confusing, but that's not actually what it's really about. It fuels the fight, it makes everything more hot-headed, but it's really just about the land. After learning more about what we saw there, I think of this kind of like as a different, if there were a wedding parable told about this, it would be very different. I think that each, Israel and Palestine, they would be like the mothers of the bride and groom. The bride's mom has been promised her place of honor at the banquet. The groom's mom has been promised her place of honor at the banquet. The groom's mom receives her place of honor. And then the bride's mom is forced to sit at the kids' table. How do you think that party's going to go? Now, obviously, I'm not Jesus, even if I do the beard and sandals thing. A real parable from him would lead into some important teaching, like about being humble in our day-to-day lives, like his parable was teaching us today. I'm just saying about the two sides of this conflict. When you meet people over there from both sides, and you learn from both sides of people, you find out that both sides of people own that land. The Palestinians have been there for a long, long time. There was a Palestinian and a Jewish person talking about this, and the Palestinian said, "How long was your family in Europe? How many generations was your family in Europe before you moved here?" And he said, 7 generations. And the Palestinian said, "Well, my family's been here for 9 generations." The Jews were promised that land in the Bible, though, right? The Bible, it's like we got this history in there, and there was a lot more stuff going on, but that's like literally what the Jews understand their history to be, and that being their land. It's the Bible. On top of that, the Jews had just been through the Holocaust. What you see in the picture is actually a view of Israel from the Holocaust Museum. The Jews just went through the Holocaust. They needed a state. The Palestinians, they weren't responsible for the Holocaust. They were already there. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? But it's the Bible. The Bible told me so. Yet in that land, there is only one place of honor, no matter how much they both have claim to it. It goes back to Britain inviting the Jews to emigrate there when anti-Semitism was getting really bad in Europe. World War I, World War II time. And then in that time, Britain ended up promising a state to Israel and promising a state to Palestine. And then only kept one of its promises, and that was to Israel. And then Palestine never got what was promised to them. And then that was 1948 war, the Palestinians invading the land that they saw being taken from them. And Israel saw it as defending their land. Israel expanded after 48, then again after 67, and now, ever since then, they've been putting these settlements there in Palestine. They've been moving further in. So here you have destruction from the war, and then ever since 48 and 67 wars, they've been moving into these settlements. So you have this land of Israel and Israeli settlements moving into the Palestinian area, except what the Palestinians call this is not settlements. There's already people there. The Palestinians call it occupation. Just like it wouldn't be pretty at the wedding with the two moms, one of them getting a place of honor and the other one not, it's not pretty in this situation between Israel and Palestine. Neither of them will stand down. They're both fighting for the rightful place. It's just not as complicated as it all seems. Israel has always wanted the whole thing, and they will tell you it all belongs to them. And they have the power that eventually they'll get it. Palestine is not letting it go quietly. The question is not about who's going to get what. The question is what is going to happen to the Palestinians. The whole conflict isn't very old at all. It doesn't go that far back. 100 years ago, there was peace between Muslims, Christians, and Jews there in the country before all this started. Now, Jesus' parable doesn't address this Israel and Palestine conflict directly. Jesus' parable hits a little more close to home. But there is a very common theme running underneath, a lesson that we could all use, a lesson that could go a long way to help in the Israel and Palestine conflict, to help them find peace if they really wanted it. A lesson that could go a long way to help each one of us find peace in our own lives if we really want it. In any situation, as you put yourself, we are called to put ourselves in the lowly seat. Like at a wedding banquet that doesn't have name tags, we get to choose where we sit. Choose the lowest seat in the room. It invites a positive response from people. But, if it's your party, then have the most strange party in the world. Don't invite your friends and family. Don't invite people who can do something for you in return. Don't invite your rich neighbors or successful people at work or this or that. Invite people who could use a hot meal. People who've been at the kids' table whether or not they brought it on themselves. And people who could use some feelings of honor in their lives. Invite the poor, invite the crippled, invite the lame, invite the blind. When you create a situation, do it in a way that is good for people, individuals and people as a whole. Treat people fairly, celebrate human life, share responsibility. Jesus stuff. Right? That which creates and promotes life. That's why we're called to be humble. Make the world better, not worse. That starts with choosing to be humble. God has a special place of honor in heaven for those who humble themselves and make this world a little better. Be it on an international scale of divine proportions in the Holy Land, or right here in lovely New Palestine. The same God who's over all of us sent today's message through Jesus. And it's a message that echoes a message from the prophet Micah long before. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with God. So as lowly disciples of Jesus Christ, let us humble ourselves, put others and the good of the world before ourselves, and look forward to the peace our God has to give, especially that at the resurrection of the righteous. And may the whole banquet be blessed.